The altar is a sacred place. It is the final step of a long journey. The edge of a cliff where two people agree to jump together, placing their absolute faith in one another. It is also a stage, a place of performance, where two people present the best version of themselves to the world. But for some, the altar is something else entirely. It is the final confessional, the one place where a secret, no matter how deeply buried, can no longer be contained. The stories you are about to hear are not just wedding disasters, they are detonations. We have collected 3 tales of grooms whose pasts caught up with them at the worst possible moment. These are stories of the moment the mask doesn't just slip, it shatters into 1,000 pieces, right in front of everyone. Our first story comes from a wedding guest who describes a couple that was the definition of perfect. High school sweethearts, Mark and Jenna. Everyone in their small town had been waiting for this wedding. The groom, Mark, was charming. The best man, his lifelong friend, was loyal. The maid of honor was the bride's own sister, a perfect triangle of trust. The ceremony was flawless. The vows were beautiful. It was at the reception, during the toasts, that the first crack appeared. The best man, David, got up to the microphone. He wasn't holding a champagne flute, he was holding a remote control. Mark and I have been through everything together, he began, his voice strangely steady. And I believe a marriage should be built on absolute honesty. So, I've prepared a little slideshow. The guests chuckled, expecting embarrassing childhood photos. The first image was normal enough. Mark and David as kids. The second too. But the third picture was not. It was a recent photo. It showed the groom, Mark, in a passionate embrace, kissing another woman. But the true horror, the twist of the knife that turned this from a disaster into a slaughter, was the identity of the woman in the photograph. It was the maid of honor, the bride's sister. A wave of sickness washed over the room. The bride, Jenna, didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stood there, a statue in white, as the best man clicked to the next slide, and the next, each one a professionally taken photograph documenting the affair. He had hired a private investigator. This wasn't a drunken mistake. It was a methodical execution. He concluded his toast with 5 simple words. Jenna, you deserved to know. He then set the microphone down and walked out of the silent room, leaving the wreckage of 2 families behind him. If the first story was a betrayal of the heart, our second is a betrayal of reality itself. This story is told from the perspective of a bride. She had met her fiancé, a charismatic entrepreneur named Julian, in a whirlwind romance. He was handsome, successful, and swept her off her feet. He was, she admits, almost too good to be true. He was vague about his past, claiming his family had passed away. He had no groomsmen, only a few business associates in attendance. The bride's family was cautious, but her happiness was so infectious, they pushed their doubts aside. The ceremony began. They stood at the altar holding hands. The priest reached the fateful line, "If anyone here has any reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace." A man in a cheap rumpled suit stood up. "I do," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. He wasn't an ex-lover. He was a process server, and in his hand, he held a stack of legal papers. "Julian Croft," he announced, his voice echoing in the horrified silence. "You are officially served these warrants for fraud, embezzlement, and bigamy." The groom's shocking secret wasn't that he had a dark past. It was that his entire identity was a lie. The man she was about to marry wasn't just a criminal. He was already married to two other women in two different states. He was a parasite, and this wedding was simply his next financial conquest. The groom didn't run, he just sighed, a tired, defeated sound. He let the two police officers who had been waiting in the back escort him out of the church. The bride was left standing at the altar, not with a husband, but with the ruins of a life she never knew was a fiction. Our final story is the quietest and perhaps the most chilling. It's not about a loud confession or a public arrest. It's about a secret that simply walked down the aisle. The story comes from a wedding guest at the marriage of a slightly older couple, both on their second marriage. This was, for them, a quiet, final chance at happiness. The ceremony was intimate and heartfelt. The bride was glowing. The groom looked at her with pure adoration. The officiant was speaking about second chances, about the beauty of finding love later in life. Everything was perfect. And then the church doors creaked open. Everyone turned to look. Standing in the doorway was a small child, a little girl, no older than 5, dressed in a simple Sunday dress. She was holding a single, slightly wilted daisy. She started walking, slowly and deliberately, up the aisle. She wasn't crying. She wasn't smiling. She just walked, her eyes fixed on the groom. The bride looked at her groom, a confused smile on her face, assuming he knew the child. But the groom's face had gone white as a sheet. He looked like a man watching a ghost walk towards him. The little girl stopped right in front of the altar. She looked up at the groom, her expression unreadable. She held out the daisy, and in a clear, small voice that everyone in the silent church could hear, she said one word: "Daddy." A woman stood up from a back pew. She wasn't screaming or crying. She just watched, her face a mask of cold satisfaction. The groom's secret wasn't a past affair. It was a present reality, a whole other life he had kept hidden just a few towns over. The little girl wasn't just a guest. She was the evidence. A secret affair, a fraudulent identity, a hidden child. 3 grooms, 3 time bombs that detonated at the moment of ultimate commitment. A wedding forces a person to bring their entire life, past and present, into the light. But some people have things buried in the shadows, things they hope will stay buried forever. These stories are a chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying words you can hear at a wedding aren't "I object." They're the truth.